The crystal chandeliers sparkled above the ballroom like 1,000 tiny stars. Champagne glasses clinked. Laughter filled the air. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching my husband raise his glass on the small stage we'd set up for speeches. To my wife, the most patient woman I know, he said, his voice carrying across the room. But his eyes weren't on me. They were locked on a woman standing near the front, someone I'd never met before. She laughed at his words, too sweetly, too knowingly. My stomach twisted. Then he added, and to someone else who's made my life brighter lately. The room went silent for a heartbeat. Guests exchanged confused glances. Some smiled awkwardly, unsure if this was part of the celebration. The woman stepped forward slightly, and her hand brushed my husband's arm in a gesture that was far too familiar, far too intimate. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. My vision narrowed to just the two of them standing there together under those glittering lights, in front of everyone we knew. I forced my lips into a trembling smile and excused myself quietly, walking toward the bathroom on legs that barely worked. That was the night my husband tried to introduce his mistress to our anniversary party. That was the night I stopped being his wife and became his lesson. My name is Diana, and until that moment I'd thought I was happily married. I stood in the bathroom hallway, my back pressed against the cool wall, mascara streaking down my cheeks. Inside the ballroom, the music continued playing. A jazz band we'd hired performing songs we'd chosen together. Or at least, songs I'd thought we'd chosen together. Now I wondered if he'd picked them for her instead. Guests walked past, glancing at me with concern or curiosity. Some whispered. I forced myself to straighten up, to wipe my face, to breathe. My husband had always told me I was too emotional, too sensitive. Maybe that's why he'd thought I would break quietly, that I'd just disappear and let him have his moment. He'd underestimated me completely. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and sent a text to my assistant. Just one word, proceed. The reply came back immediately. Done. I looked at myself in the decorative mirror hanging in the hallway. My dress was elegant, my hair perfect, my makeup ruined. But underneath the tears, something else was visible. Determination, anger, purpose. I'd known about this for months. I'd been preparing. Tonight wasn't going to end the way he'd planned. Not even close. I took a deep breath, fixed my makeup as best I could, and walked back toward the celebration. The real show was about to begin. 2 weeks earlier, I'd been sitting in my home office late at night. My husband, Tyler, was supposedly at a business dinner. I'd stopped believing his excuses months ago. On my laptop screen was a folder labeled simply with the letter A. Inside were photos I'd been collecting for 6 months. Tyler with a woman at restaurants I'd never been to. Tyler walking hand in hand with her through a park. Tyler kissing her outside a hotel. There were text messages, too. Screenshots I'd managed to capture from his phone when he'd left it unattended. Messages where he called her sweetheart and baby and promised her they'd be together soon. Receipts for jewelry I'd never received. Hotel bookings for nights he'd claimed to be traveling for work. Bank statements showing cash withdrawals he couldn't explain. I'd known for months. Every lie, every late night, every mysterious phone call. I'd known. But instead of confronting him, I'd waited. I'd documented everything meticulously. I'd planned, because my father had taught me something important before he died. Never fight with noise, Diana. Silence scares people more. I closed the laptop and looked at the anniversary party invitation sitting on my desk. Tyler had insisted on hosting it at a luxury hotel. He'd wanted something big, something memorable. He'd get exactly that, just not in the way he'd expected. I whispered to the empty room soon, very soon. I'd become an expert at playing the perfect wife. Every morning I made Tyler breakfast. Scrambled eggs exactly how he liked them, coffee with just a splash of cream. I'd sit across from him at the table, smiling, asking about his day, pretending I didn't know where he'd really been the night before. We attended events together, his hand in mine, the picture of a happy couple. Our friends constantly told me how lucky I was, what a great husband Tyler was, how devoted he seemed. I'd smile and agree, while inside I documented every inconsistency in his stories. Every time his phone buzzed and he'd quickly hide the screen. Every evening he came home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. My best friend had asked me once if everything was okay. "You seem distant lately," she'd said. "I'm just tired," I'd replied. Planning the anniversary party is exhausting. She'd bought the excuse easily. Everyone did, because I'd gotten very good at pretending. At maintaining the facade while quietly gathering ammunition. One afternoon, while Tyler was in the shower, I'd searched his car. In the glove compartment, hidden under insurance papers and old receipts, I'd found a key. Hotel key card. Room 217. I'd photographed it, put it back exactly where I'd found it, and added the information to my growing file. Every piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I was building his downfall one lie at a time. I'd used that key card on a Tuesday afternoon. Tyler had told me he had meetings all day. I'd called the hotel and confirmed that room 217 was registered under his name. My hands had shaken as I'd driven across town, the key card burning in my purse like evidence of something I didn't want to confirm. But I needed to see it with my own eyes, to make sure I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining things. The hotel hallway had been quiet, plush carpet muffling my footsteps. I'd stopped outside room 217 and pressed my ear to the door. Laughter. Her voice, light and carefree, his voice warmer than it had been with me in years. I'd slid the key card into the lock. The light had turned green. I'd pushed the door open. The laughter had stopped immediately. Tyler stood there in nothing but a towel, water still dripping from his hair. She was in the bed, wrapped in sheets, her eyes wide with shock. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then I'd said, calmly, quietly, "You left your phone on the counter." I'd walked over, picked up his phone, which had been recording a voice memo he'd apparently forgotten about, and dropped it loudly on the floor. Then I'd picked up my purse, looked at both of them one more time, and walked out. I'd left the door wide open behind me. His phone had still been recording. Our entire exchange captured in audio. I'd smiled in the elevator on the way down. Perfect. Tyler had come home that evening looking nervous. Guilty. He'd found me in the kitchen preparing dinner like nothing had happened. "Deanna, we need to talk," he'd started. I turned to him with a bright smile. About what? He'd searched my face, confused by my calm demeanor. He'd hesitated about this afternoon. "What about it?" I'd asked innocently. He'd stumbled over his words. "I've been working too much. I'm sorry. I've been neglecting you." I'd walked over and kissed his cheek. "It's okay. I understand. Your work is important." The relief on his face had been obvious. He'd actually thought I'd bought it, that I hadn't seen what I'd seen, that I was that naive. We'd eaten dinner together. He'd told me elaborate stories about his day, his meeting, his clients. Every word was a lie. Every sentence added to the mountain of deception. I'd listened attentively, nodding in all the right places, asking follow-up questions, playing my role perfectly. After dinner, while he'd watched television, I'd gone upstairs to my office. I'd transferred the audio recording from his phone to my computer, added it to the folder. Then I'd opened my video editing software and started a new project. Title: Anniversary Presentation. That night, I'd worked until 3 a.m, carefully crafting something that would make the truth impossible to deny. Every lie he'd told me would be exposed. Every moment he'd thought was secret would be public. He'd wanted a celebration. He'd get one. I'd found her social media easily enough. Her privacy settings weren't very strict, probably because she'd never expected the wife to go looking. Her name was Victoria. She was 28, 12 years younger than me. Her profile was full of photos, luxury vacations, designer handbags, expensive jewelry, subtle captions like "He promised me forever," and "Sometimes the best things are worth waiting for." I'd scrolled through months of posts, my anger building with each one. I recognized many of the gifts in her photos. The diamond bracelet Tyler had claimed was a business expense. The weekend trip to the coast he'd said was a conference. The designer watch I'd seen charged to our credit card. I'd paid for all of it, my money funding his affair. There was a post from 2 weeks ago that had made me stop scrolling, a photo of a hotel resort, the same resort where we were hosting our anniversary party. The caption read, "Can't wait for this weekend." Dreams are finally coming true. He'd invited her to our anniversary party. The audacity was breathtaking. My hands had clenched into fists as I'd stared at that photo. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. He was planning to parade her in front of me, in front of our friends and family, and expected me to just accept it. I'd screenshot the post, added it to my presentation. By the time I was done with that video, everyone would know exactly who Victoria was and what Tyler had done. A week before the party, Tyler had given me the guest list to review. I'd scanned through the names, recognizing most of them: family, friends, business associates. Then I'd seen it. Victoria Hayes, +1, my heart had stopped. I'd looked up at Tyler, who was reading something on his phone, completely casual. "Who's Victoria Hayes?" I'd asked, keeping my voice neutral. Tyler hadn't even looked up. "Someone from work. I thought it would be nice to include the team. She's been helping with a major project." My hands had started to tremble. I'd gripped the paper tighter to hide it. That's nice of you to include her. He'd smiled, pleased with himself. I try to appreciate good employees. I'd gone back to reviewing the list, making small notes, pretending everything was normal. But inside, I'd been screaming. He was really doing this, really inviting his mistress to our anniversary celebration. The disrespect was stunning. That afternoon, I'd called the event coordinator, the woman who'd been helping us plan everything for months. I have one technical request, I'd said. I'd like to add a private projector feed for a surprise video presentation. The coordinator had been enthusiastic. Oh, how romantic. Of course, we can arrange that. Just send us the file a few days before. Perfect, I'd replied. I'll send it directly to you. She'd had no idea what kind of surprise it would be. Neither did Tyler. Neither did Victoria, but they would, very soon. 3 days before the party, I'd visited my father's grave. He'd been gone for 5 years, but I still went when I needed advice, when I needed to feel connected to the only person who'd ever truly understood me. I'd sat on the grass beside his headstone, holding the USB drive that contained the video presentation. The morning was quiet, just birds and distant traffic. Dad used to say, "Never fight with noise, Diana. Silence scares people more." He'd meant it literally and figuratively. Don't yell, don't throw things, don't make scenes, just be quiet, be smart, and strike when they least expect it. I'd learned that lesson well. Tyler thought I was the emotional one, the one who couldn't control herself, the one who'd cry and scream if I ever found out about his affair. He had no idea how wrong he was. I'd traced my father's name carved into the granite. "You were right, Dad," I'd whispered. "They never see quiet people coming." The wind had rustled through the trees. For a moment, I'd felt my father's presence, his approval, his understanding. He would have hated what Tyler did to me, would have wanted me to fight back. I'd stood up, brushing grass from my dress. The USB drive was secure in my purse. The date of the anniversary party was circled on my calendar. Everything was ready. I'd driven home feeling calmer than I had in months. Justice was coming. Patient, quiet, devastating justice. The night of the party, I'd sat at my vanity for a long time, applying makeup with careful precision. I'd worn the same perfume I'd worn on our wedding day 10 years ago. The dress I'd chosen was elegant, sophisticated, a deep blue that Tyler had once said was his favorite color. He'd knocked on the bedroom door as I'd been putting on my earrings. "Diana, you almost ready?" I turned to look at him. He'd been wearing the suit I'd bought him for his birthday. His hair was styled perfectly. He looked handsome. He also looked like a man about to destroy his wife publicly. "Come in," I'd said. He'd entered, adjusting his cufflinks. "You look beautiful," he'd said, and for a moment he'd sounded sincere. "Thank you," I'd replied with a small smile. "You look wonderful too," though I'd already known I was dressing for his humiliation, not our celebration. He'd come over and kissed my forehead. "I know I've been distracted lately, but tonight is special. Thank you for planning all of this." It hadn't been a question, just an assumption that I'd done all the work while he'd been busy with his affair. "You're welcome," I'd said sweetly. "I think it will be a night no one forgets." He'd smiled, completely missing the double meaning. I'd slipped the USB drive into my purse while his back was turned. My heart had been pounding, not from fear, from anticipation, from the absolute certainty that everything was about to change. The ballroom had been transformed into something magical. White flowers everywhere, candles on every table. The lighting was soft and romantic. A jazz band played gentle music as guests arrived. Tyler and I had stood at the entrance, greeting people together, playing the happy couple. His hand had been on my lower back, possessive and familiar. Friends had hugged us both, congratulating us on 10 years of marriage. "You two are couple goals," someone had said. I'd smiled and thanked them. All the while, my purse had hung on my shoulder, the USB drive inside weighing nothing but feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I'd watched Victoria arrive fashionably late, wearing a dress that was too flashy for the occasion, red and attention-seeking. She'd smiled at Tyler from across the room. He'd squeezed my waist and excused himself to greet some business associates. I'd watched him make his way toward her, watched them exchange glances that they thought were subtle. The MC, a friend of Tyler's, had eventually called everyone to attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in celebrating Diana and Tyler's 10th anniversary." The crowd had applauded. Tyler had squeezed my hand, looking pleased with himself. The MC had continued, "We have a special video presentation that Diana has prepared, showcasing their journey together." I'd stepped slightly away, pretending to be surprised and modest. Tyler had beamed, thinking I'd made some romantic montage of our marriage. He'd had no idea what was coming. None of them did. The lights had dimmed. The projector had hummed to life behind us. I'd positioned myself at the side of the room, near the exit, while Tyler had remained center stage, basking in the attention. He'd raised his glass to the crowd, preparing to make a toast before the video played. But the MC had already started the presentation. The screen had flickered. Music had started playing, not the romantic song Tyler might have expected. Something else. Something I'd chosen carefully. The first image had appeared on screen. A photo of Tyler and Victoria, not from their social media, from my private collection. Them holding hands in a park, the timestamp clearly visible. 3 months ago, the room had gone very still. People had leaned forward, confused. Laughter had stopped mid-sentence. Is that, someone had whispered? The image had changed. Another photo. Tyler kissing Victoria outside a restaurant, then another. Them at a hotel entrance. Then video footage. Actual video I'd collected from hotel security cameras I'd sweet-talked my way into accessing. Tyler's hand tracing Victoria's leg in a hotel lobby. The camera had panned up to show both their faces clearly. No possibility of mistaken identity. No room for doubt. Guests had started murmuring. Tyler had turned pale, staring at the screen in horror. He'd looked at me, and I'd simply returned his gaze calmly. The video had continued. Clip after clip. Evidence I'd been collecting for months, edited together into an undeniable narrative of betrayal. The truth, finally exposed for everyone to see. Murmurs had grown louder. Someone had gasped audibly. Tyler had suddenly moved, rushing toward the technician's booth at the back of the room. "Stop it," he'd shouted. "Turn it off." But I'd already locked the controls. I'd worked with the AV technician directly, giving him specific instructions and a generous tip to ensure the video played all the way through no matter what. The screen had continued showing the truth Tyler had tried so hard to hide. More photos, more videos, then something even more damaging. Audio recordings. His voice, clear and unmistakable, saying things to Victoria that should have been said only to me. "I love you. She means nothing to me anymore. We'll be together soon, I promise." The room had erupted. Gasps. Shocked whispers. Some guests had pulled out their phones, recording the spectacle. Victoria had covered her face with her hands, trying to become invisible. Some of Tyler's business partners had stood up, their expressions a mixture of disgust and professional concern. This was their colleague, their associate, exposed as a liar and a cheat in the most public way possible. The video had shown more. Text messages. Screenshots of conversations where Tyler had badmouthed me to Victoria, where he'd complained about our marriage, where he'd called me boring and predictable. Every cruel word on display for our friends and family to see. My mother-in-law had been crying. My own mother had looked at me with understanding and sadness. Everyone had known now. There was no way to explain this away, no way to spin it, just truth, devastating and complete. The video had continued rolling. More evidence, more proof. Hotel receipts charged to credit cards I'd helped pay for, jewelry purchases, vacation bookings. A complete timeline of the affair laid out in chronological order. Tyler had given up trying to stop the video and had turned to me instead. "Please," he'd said, his voice breaking. "Please stop this." But I'd stood motionless, watching the screen, watching him crumble. The final clip had been the worst. Recent audio from just last week where Victoria had asked Tyler if he was really going to invite her to the anniversary party. His response had been casual, dismissive. "She'll never suspect. Diana's completely oblivious. Besides, I'm tired of hiding. It's time to make this official." That line had hung in the air. Time to make this official. At our anniversary party. The ultimate disrespect. The screen had faded to black. The ballroom had been completely silent. Hundreds of people who'd come to celebrate a marriage had instead witnessed its very public destruction. I'd walked calmly to the microphone while Tyler had stood frozen, unable to move or speak. I'd picked up a champagne glass from a nearby table. I'd looked directly at Tyler, then at Victoria, who was still trying to hide behind her hands. Then I'd raised my glass. To the man who thought he could have everything, I'd said clearly, my voice steady, and to the woman who thought she could take what wasn't hers. I'd taken a slow sip. The room had been so quiet you could hear the bubbles in the champagne. Then I'd smiled. "Happy anniversary, Tyler," and I'd walked out. I hadn't run, hadn't cried. I'd walked slowly, deliberately through the silent crowd. People had parted to let me pass, staring at me with expressions of shock, sympathy, and something else. Respect, maybe. awe at the calculated precision of what I'd just done. Behind me, the ballroom had erupted into chaos, voices overlapping, Tyler trying to make excuses, guests arguing, some people shouting, but I'd kept walking. My head high until I'd reached my car in the parking garage. Only then had I allowed myself to breathe. My hands had shaken as I'd started the engine. Adrenaline had flooded my system. For months, I'd been planning this moment, preparing, building my case, and now it was done. The truth was out. Everyone knew. I'd driven to a hotel across town, not the one where Tyler had been meeting Victoria, a different one. I'd checked in under my own name, gone to my room, and finally let myself feel everything. The pain, the anger, the satisfaction, the grief for a marriage that had been dead long before tonight. I'd cried. But they were different tears than Tyler had probably expected. Not tears of weakness or devastation, tears of release, of freedom. I'd fallen asleep still wearing my blue dress, emotionally exhausted but somehow lighter than I'd felt in months. Tomorrow would bring consequences, legal battles, financial complications, social fallout. But tonight, I'd done what I needed to do. I'd exposed the truth, and there was power in that. Next morning, my phone had exploded with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, social media mentions. The video had spread beyond the party. Someone had recorded it and posted it online. By sunrise, it had gone viral. Local news had picked it up. Woman exposes husband's affair at anniversary party. The video had been shared thousands of times. Comments had flooded in. Most were supportive. Good for her. He deserved that. What a strong woman. Some were critical. That was cruel. She could have handled it privately, but I'd known private confrontation wouldn't have worked. Tyler was too good at manipulation, too practiced at lying. Public exposure had been the only way to ensure he couldn't rewrite the narrative later. My lawyer had called early. "Deanna," she'd said, her voice concerned, "I'm seeing the video everywhere. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I'd replied. Though I'd felt anything but fine. I'd felt raw and exposed and strangely powerful all at once. "Tyler's trying to freeze your joint assets," my lawyer had continued. "He filed an emergency motion this morning." Of course he had. I'd expected it. "That's fine," I'd told her. "I moved my money months ago." There had been silence on the other end. "You what?" "I'd transferred my portion into a private trust," I'd explained. 3 months ago, I consulted with a financial advisor. Tyler's name isn't on any of it. My lawyer had let out a long breath. "You planned this?" "Thoroughly." "No," I'd said. "He planned this. I just prepared for the consequences." More fallout had come quickly. Tyler's business partners had started calling. Not him, me. They wanted to understand what had happened, to assess the damage to their company's reputation. Tyler's behavior had been unprofessional at best, potentially damaging at worst. One partner had been particularly blunt. "We're considering removing him from his position. This kind of personal drama affecting our company image is unacceptable." I'd said nothing, just listened. Let them make their own decisions. Victoria had deleted all her social media accounts. Her Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Everything was gone, running from the consequences of being the other woman, hiding from the judgment that had come swift and harsh. People were tagging her in the video, calling her out, making her affair with a married man very public knowledge. I'd felt a moment of sympathy, then remembered the posts where she'd flaunted the gifts my money had paid for. The sympathy had evaporated. Tyler had tried calling me repeatedly. I'd blocked his number. Then he'd tried emailing. Long messages that alternated between apologizing, blaming me, and begging for a chance to explain. I'd read none of them, just set up a filter to send them directly to my lawyer. 3 days after the party, my lawyer had called again with news. His mistress just filed for bankruptcy. What? The gifts he gave her, my lawyer had explained. Turns out he was using company credit cards. His business partners found out and demanded repayment. She can't afford to return everything, so she's declaring bankruptcy. The irony was almost funny. Victoria had thought she was getting a man who could give her a luxurious life. Instead, she'd gotten debt and public humiliation. Tyler's public breakdown had been both spectacular and pathetic. He tried posting on social media, attempting to control the narrative, asking for privacy, claiming the video was misleading, but the evidence had been too overwhelming. The court of public opinion had already made its judgment. I'd watched from a distance as his life had unraveled. His business had put him on indefinite leave. His friends had distanced themselves. His family had been torn between loyalty to him and disgust at what he'd done. One afternoon, I'd seen a video someone had posted. Tyler leaving his office building with a cardboard box of his belongings. His face had been pale and defeated. Security had escorted him out, the mighty fall. The phone calls from Tyler had continued despite my blocking him. He'd started using other people's phones, his mother's, his brother's, finally getting through. "Deanna, please," he'd begged. "I made a terrible mistake." "Can we talk?" "There's nothing to talk about," I'd said. "Everything that needed to be said was in that video, but I love you." His voice had broken. "I always loved you." "If you'd loved me," I'd replied calmly, "you wouldn't have done what you did." The calls had eventually stopped when I'd changed my number completely. A week after the party, a letter had arrived, from Tyler's mother. The envelope had been thick, the handwriting angry. Inside, she'd called me vindictive, cruel, destructive. She'd blamed me for destroying her son's life, his reputation, his career. I'd read it once. Then I'd calmly replied by email, attaching a link to the full video and copies of some of the worst text messages. Then I'd blocked her too. I didn't need her validation, didn't need anyone's approval. What Tyler had done spoke for itself. 2 months after the party, an invitation had arrived in my mail. Heavy cardstock, elegant script. A charity gala hosted by Tyler's former company. They were making a statement, moving forward without him, showing donors and clients that they'd dealt with the situation. The invitation had been addressed specifically to me, Deanna Winters, not Diana and Tyler Winters, just me. I'd held that invitation for a long time, deciding. Part of me had wanted to hide, to avoid any situation where I might see Tyler. But another part, the part that had planned that video, that had walked out of that ballroom with my head high, knew I couldn't hide forever. I'd RSVP'd yes. The night of the gala, I'd chosen my outfit carefully. A crimson gown that was elegant but bold. I'd worn my hair up, makeup perfect, every inch of me projecting confidence I'd had to rebuild piece by piece over the past 2 months. When I'd arrived, whispers had followed me immediately. "That's her. The woman from the video. She looks amazing. Is her ex here?" I'd walked through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting sympathetic smiles, politely deflecting questions. The new CEO, a woman named Jasmine whom I'd actually helped hire as an intern 5 years ago, had raised a toast to new beginnings built on honesty and integrity. She'd looked directly at me when she'd said it, acknowledging what had happened without dwelling on it. Then I'd seen him. Tyler, sitting alone at a table in the back. He'd looked terrible, thinner, older, defeated. Our eyes had met across the room. He'd started to stand, to approach, but I'd turned away, continuing my conversation as if I hadn't seen him at all. Tyler had eventually managed to corner me near the bar. "Deanna," he'd said quietly. "Can we talk?" "There's nothing to discuss," I'd replied, not looking at him. "Please, just 5 minutes." I'd finally turned to face him. He looked nothing like the confident man who'd stood on that stage at our anniversary party. This man was broken, desperate, grasping for something that no longer existed. "You ruined me," he'd said, and there was anger mixed with his desperation. I smiled, and it was genuine. "No, Tyler, you ruined yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. I didn't do anything to you. I just provided the audience." His face had flushed. "That's the same thing." "It really isn't," I'd replied. "You made every choice that led to that moment. The affair, the lies, inviting her to our anniversary party. I just documented it." Tyler had looked around, seeing people watching us. His humiliation was public and complete. "I loved you," he'd said, his voice breaking. "Maybe you did," I'd acknowledged, "but you loved yourself more. You loved the thrill of the affair more. You loved impressing her more. Whatever you felt for me died long before that party." I'd picked up my champagne glass and taken a sip. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have people to talk to. People who actually respect me." As I'd walked away, I'd felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no lingering love, just emptiness where he used to be. And that was exactly how it should be. He'd become irrelevant. A chapter that was closed, a lesson learned, nothing more. I'd been talking with Jasmine when Victoria had appeared. I'd seen her through the glass doors, standing outside the venue, watching. She'd looked different, less polished. Her clothes were ordinary, not designer. Her confidence was gone. For a moment, I'd thought she'd leave. But then she'd gathered her courage and walked inside. People had noticed her immediately. The whispers had grown louder. "That's the mistress. What's she doing here?" Victoria had made her way through the crowd, ignoring the stares until she'd found me. She'd stopped a few feet away, her hands clasped together nervously. "Can I talk to you?" she'd asked quietly. I'd looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. We'd stepped outside to a quieter area of the patio. The night air had been cool and refreshing. For a minute, neither of us had spoken. Finally, Victoria had said, "He promised to leave you." Her voice had been angry but also broken. He said you didn't understand him, that you'd grown apart, that he was just waiting for the right time. He promised you too, didn't he? I'd replied calmly, that he'd give you everything, that you'd have a life together. Victoria's eyes had filled with tears. Yes, the promises had been lies to both of us. We'd stood there, two women who'd been deceived by the same man, finding common ground in unexpected ways. I'm sorry, Victoria had finally whispered. For my part in this, for helping destroy your marriage. I'd nodded slowly. I appreciate that. But it wasn't just you. Tyler made his choices. We both believed his lies. She'd reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She'd handed it to me. You deserve better than him. Then she'd walked away. The note Victoria had given me was simple, just a few lines in her handwriting. I was wrong about everything. He lied to me like he lied to you. I hope you find real happiness, not the fake kind he sold us. I'd folded it carefully and put it in my purse. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement. Understanding that we'd both been victims of Tyler's manipulations, even if Victoria's victimhood had come after being his co-conspirator. The months that followed had been about rebuilding. I'd filed for divorce officially. Tyler had tried to fight it, but with the video evidence and the documentation I'd collected, his lawyer had eventually advised him to settle. I'd gotten the house. The savings I'd already moved. Half of everything we'd accumulated together. The process had been surprisingly quick once Tyler had accepted he had no leverage. No way to negotiate from a position of strength. 6 months after that anniversary party, I'd opened my own consulting firm, helping women navigate divorces, specifically helping them understand their financial rights and how to protect themselves. The demand had been immediate and overwhelming. My story had become quietly known in certain circles, not as scandal, but as empowerment, as an example of a woman who'd refused to be a victim, who'd taken control of her own narrative, who demanded truth and dignity. The work had been fulfilling in ways I'd never expected. Every woman I helped felt like honoring my own journey, like transforming my pain into purpose, my trauma into strength. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, and that was the best revenge of all. A year after the party, a journalist had called. She'd been writing a piece about women who'd exposed infidelity in creative ways. She'd wanted to interview me about the video. At first, I declined. But then I'd thought about all the women I was helping, all the women who felt alone and trapped in marriages full of lies. Maybe my story could help them too. The interview had been published in a major magazine. The headline, "The Woman Who Turned Betrayal into Brilliance." The article had focused not on the scandal, but on the strength it took to plan so carefully, to stay calm under pressure, to rebuild after devastation. The response had been overwhelming. Women had reached out from all over the country, sharing their own stories, asking for advice, thanking me for being brave. The video itself had become almost legendary, a symbol of refusing to accept betrayal quietly, of demanding truth and consequences. People had called me strong, brave, inspiring. But I'd known the truth. I wasn't special. I'd just been a woman who'd had enough, who decided that silence wasn't strength, that exposing truth was. My consulting firm had grown. I'd hired 2 associates, rented a proper office space, created a nonprofit arm specifically for helping women who couldn't afford legal help during divorces. My father would have been proud. He taught me to be quiet and strategic, to fight smart, not loud. That night at the anniversary party, I'd followed his advice perfectly. The result had been devastating for Tyler and Victoria, but liberating for me. Justice, I'd learned, didn't always need to be loud. Sometimes it just needed to be thorough. The article had gone viral online. Millions of views, thousands of shares. Comment sections filled with people debating the ethics of what I'd done. Most were supportive. She had every right to expose him publicly. He invited his mistress to their anniversary. What did he expect? Some were critical. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Public humiliation isn't the answer. But I'd stopped caring about the critics. The women I was helping, the lives I was changing. That was what mattered. My business phone had rung constantly for weeks after the article. Media requests, speaking invitations, women seeking consultation. I'd been selective about which opportunities to accept. I'd wanted to help, not become a celebrity. One evening, I'd been featured on a podcast about women and financial independence. The host had asked, "Do you regret the video?" I'd thought carefully before answering. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that Tyler made choices that led to that moment. But do I regret exposing the truth? No, never. The host had pressed further. Some people say it was cruel. I'd smiled. Cruel would have been letting him continue lying. Letting Victoria think she'd won something real. Letting our friends and family continue believing in a marriage that didn't exist. Truth isn't cruel. It's just uncomfortable for people who have been lying. That clip from the podcast had been shared widely, turned into memes, quoted on social media. I'd become, somehow, a voice for women who refused to stay silent, who demanded honesty and accountability. It wasn't a role I'd sought, but it was one I'd accepted. Because every woman who reached out, every story I heard about someone finding the courage to leave a bad situation, made everything I'd been through worthwhile. My pain had purpose now. My betrayal had become a bridge to helping others. 2 years after the anniversary party, I'd been working late in my office when my assistant had knocked on the door. "Diana, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important." I'd looked up from the contract I'd been reviewing. "Who is it?" She'd hesitated. "Tyler, your ex-husband." My heart had done something strange, not quite a skip, just a small acknowledgement that this name still had power, even diminished. "Send him in," I'd said after a moment. Tyler had entered slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something fragile. He'd looked older but healthier than the last time I'd seen him, like he'd been working on himself. "Diana," he'd started, then stopped. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What do you want, Tyler?" I came to apologize, properly. Not because I want anything, not because I'm trying to fix what I broke, just because you deserve to hear it. I'd leaned back in my chair, studying him. "I'm listening." He'd taken a deep breath. "What I did to you was unforgivable. The affair, the lies, inviting her to our party, all of it. I've spent 2 years in therapy trying to understand why I destroyed the best thing in my life." I'd said nothing, just waited. I was selfish, he'd continued. Arrogant. "I thought I could have everything without consequences. I thought you'd never find out, or if you did, that you'd just quietly accept it." His voice had broken slightly. "I underestimated you completely." "Yes," I'd said simply. "You did. I'm not asking for forgiveness," he'd said. "I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were always stronger than me, always smarter. And I threw away someone irreplaceable for something meaningless." I'd looked at him for a long moment. On my desk was a framed photo, not of him, of me at a speaking engagement, confident and whole. Behind me on the wall was another frame with a quote my father used to say, "Forgive but never forget." Tyler had followed my gaze to that quote. "I've learned something," he'd said quietly. "You can't undo betrayal. You can only learn from it and try to be better." "I hope you've learned," I'd replied. "For your sake and whoever comes after me." He'd nodded slowly. "I have. Or I'm trying to. That's all anyone can do." He'd stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're doing well, that you didn't let what I did destroy you." I almost smiled. "Tyler, you didn't destroy me. You just showed me who I was beneath the role of wife I'd been playing." He'd left without another word. I'd sat there for a while afterward, feeling a sense of completion I hadn't expected. The man who'd hurt me had apologized, had acknowledged his wrongs. But more importantly, I'd realized that his apology didn't matter as much as I'd once thought it would. My healing had never been dependent on him. My worth had never been tied to his recognition. I'd rebuilt myself without his permission, without his validation, without his presence at all. Some celebrations end in champagne and toasts. Mine had ended in truth and transformation. And looking at the life I'd built from the ashes of that betrayal, the business that helped others, the strength I'd discovered, the peace I'd found, I wouldn't have changed a thing. The video at that anniversary party hadn't just ended their celebration. It had started mine, my real celebration. The one where I discovered that dignity, truth, and strategic silence were more powerful than any lie. Where I learned that the best revenge wasn't destroying someone else. It was building a life so fulfilling that they became irrelevant. Tyler had tried to humiliate me by parading his affair publicly. Instead, he'd given me the perfect stage to expose his lies and step into my own power. As I closed my laptop that evening and prepared to leave my office, I glanced one more time at my father's quote on the wall. "Forgive, but never forget." I'd forgiven Tyler. Not for him, but for me, because holding on to anger would have only poisoned my own happiness. But I'd never forget the lesson he taught me, that I was stronger than I'd ever known, that I could survive betrayal and come out better. That truth, patient and strategic, always wins in the end. The anniversary party video still existed somewhere online, a permanent record of that night. But it wasn't a source of shame for me anymore. It was a reminder, a symbol, proof that you can take your worst moment and transform it into your greatest strength. That sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of something better. I turned off the lights and walked out into the evening, leaving the past exactly where it belonged. Behind me, where it could never hurt me again.